as most of you know. So it's good to have a mix of countries here in this context. So very happy to follow it.
Thank you so much for finding time and for your interest. It's really important. I see Olavo from Cabo Verde, but he's working now in Angola. He joined. Olá, Olavo, bem-vindo.
Bem-vindo, boa tarde.
Boa tarde. E vamos começar muito em breve. Let us then start our meeting. Thank you very much for joining on time.
Não.
Thank you very much for joining this meeting. So one of the important things we have to do today is to then start by asking all of you, for the time being, to please mute your microphones. And so thank you very much, all colleagues, participants, representatives from many countries, for your time and for your interest always in these peer learning webinars. There are many new participants, new countries today, and we welcome all of you and hope we can continue this journey together. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Eduardo Castelbranco and I am the thematic expert supporting this project, which is the pod project developing the African framework. Monsieur Adoum, il faut fermer votre microphone. Monsieur Adoum, fermez votre microphone. So today we will have 3 languages. So for the first time, we have the three languages: English, French, and Portuguese. And the main substantive presentations will be one in each of these languages. So please, colleagues, you have to use you have to choose the correct interpretation channel. For a smooth interaction today, so just remind all of us a few rules of Zoom webinar. So please mute your microphones when you are not speaking. Use the chat box, please, to write your questions, your comments, your ideas. You can stay visible. Actually, in Zoom, you can stay visible. It's not a problem. And as I said, please choose the right interpretation channel. On the bottom of your screen, you see a symbol in shape of a globe. So this is the third peer learning webinar of this project, developing the African Continental Qualifications Framework, ACQF. That's the acronym we are going to use throughout, of course, this session. Very briefly, you have all received the agenda. You have also seen the web link to this web page of our event, in which you could find, of course, all the presentations already available in the 3 languages. And the agenda, as you all know, is focused on sharing of experiences of other qualifications frameworks, various qualifications frameworks. So we have today the 3 cases: Mauritius, National Qualifications Framework, France, and Portugal. We also have time, of course, for questions and answers. And we will have a discussant. S'il vous plaît, pouvez-vous fermer votre microphone?
Can you please mute your microphones? Anyone whose microphone is on should please mute it.
We will talk more later. For the time being, let us just mute the microphones. We will have then the discussant, Mr. Joe Samuels. Then finally, as always, we have this interactive assessment using Mentimeter. Before we start, let us then discuss, or just very briefly have an overview of what the ACQF is as a project and development, what has been done and what are the main learnings from the previous webinar, the webinar that took place on 16th of July. And then we go directly to the first substantive presentation, which is then done by Robin Pultrund, who is the director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority. So it's always important to start by contextualizing what we are doing here today. So let us remind the ACQF vision. As you all know, the ACQF is a policy initiative of the African Union, and the ACQF is currently in construction. And this process is supported by a project that runs until 2022. The project has several components like a mapping study, development of the actual ACQF policy and technical document, and capacity development. And you understand all that capacity development is the component in which these peer learning webinars are placed. Let me again remind, for those who already who don't know yet this, because they are new in this process, it's useful, I think, that the ACQF is not an isolated policy. It is part of the ecosystem of Agenda 2063 of the African Union, of its 10-year implementation plan 2023. The ACQF is also a requisite of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2025 and of the AU Protocol on Free Movement of Persons. And finally, it's an enabling factor of African Continental Free Trade Area. So the ACQF has a vision to be inclusive of all. Please mute. So all levels of qualifications, higher education, TVET, school education, other credentials, should be receptive to innovation, new trends, new technologies, open to learn from good practice, from stakeholders' views as well. And this all important to achieve the combined goals of comparability, enhanced comparability, quality, transparency of qualifications, facilitate recognition of qualifications, lifelong learning and mobility, work in complementarity with national and regional qualifications frameworks in Africa, support the creation of a common African education space, and naturally promote cooperation and alignment between qualifications frameworks, national, regional, both in Africa and also worldwide. The ACQF is going to be an overarching framework against which national and regional frameworks and level descriptors can be calibrated. We are talking about referencing or alignment. That's still a discussion of qualifications frameworks. Probably in the future, use of ACQF levels in qualifications documents. Very important that all African Union member states are asking that the ACQF plays a role of a catalyst in development, consolidation of national qualifications frameworks and their instruments. A very brief also overview of where the continent stands currently in terms of qualifications frameworks. So from this graph, and this graph concerns only 38 countries, not the 55, is based on data collected through the ACQF mapping study. As you can see, on one side, we have 48% of these countries with national qualifications frameworks at the stage of early thinking or in development and consultation. On the other side, more in green colors, you can see that 42% of the countries, 38 always is the reference, have qualifications frameworks at the stage of implementation, Either they have adopted legal acts and started implementation, or they are already in advanced implementation stage after revisions. Let us then recall or just very briefly contextualize this capacity development program of the ACQF, in which this third webinar is included. I said earlier that one of the components of the project, ACQF development, is capacity development. And it is based on, let's say, a combination of two approaches. One is peer learning, initial level of learning, phase 1, this year, 2020, until end of October. The phase 2, a more advanced level of learning, will take place in 2022. Will include training, e-learning platforms, webinars, and also practical application. And the purpose is to have, in the end, an ACQF experts network, which can deal with sustainability of all these actions in the future. So we are now here in phase 2, initial level peer learning. Let us also recall very briefly the timeline and the plan we have designed and already presented in the previous webinar, but it's important to always remind. Colleagues, s'il vous plaît, fermez vos microphones. Colleagues, please let us close the microphone. Thank you. So in July, we had already 2 webinars. You can easily see the country cases or the NQF and RQF cases that were shared. So we had Kenya, Slovenia, and the European Qualifications Framework in the very first webinar. Then in the second webinar, another mix of different cases started with Mozambique Qualifications Framework, ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework, Ireland, and now we are here. So we are going today to learn about Mauritius, France, and Portugal, 3 national qualifications frameworks. So today we don't really have a regional overarching qualifications framework. As you also can see, today this webinar, the third, is the last one in which we have European national qualifications frameworks or on the program. So the next webinars, so we will have another 4 until end of October, will all be dealing and covering African experiences, but also the Middle East. So we will have a case of Bahrain National Qualifications Framework, a robust framework, and also the Arab Qualifications Framework at the next webinar. That will take place on the 24th of September. The 3 case studies today, as already said, as already mentioned, and as you have seen on the agenda, are Mauritius, France, and Portugal. Briefly, a very brief overview of important, let's say, features. Of course, the speakers will say all of this much better, so I'm not going to repeat. I just would like already to introduce them. We will have the director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority, Dr. Robin Pulchund. This is one of the frameworks with a very long-standing experience. Then for France, we will have Madame Brigitte Bouquet, and this will be a presentation in French. Madame Brigitte Bouquet is the representative, the official representative of France at the advisory group of the European Qualifications Framework. Brigitte has a very long-standing lead role with the NQF and registers of qualifications in France, they are now under the umbrella of the newly, let's say, established institution, France Compétences. From Portugal, we will have Madame Teresa Duarte, who is also the official representative at the advisory group of the European Qualifications Framework. So Mrs. Teresa Duarte has also a long career at the National Agency for Qualifications and Professional Education of Portugal, and precisely at the Department of National Qualifications Catalog. And so now, I just wanted also to point to the fact that today we will have the first 2 cases of NQFs of 8 levels, France and Portugal. so far, we always had experiences of national qualifications frameworks of 10 levels. And now let us dedicate a few minutes to the topics, to the themes that we are handling and discussing, exploring in these peer learning webinars. The reason why we dedicate some time to still speaking about the themes and about a recap of what has been learned in the previous webinar is quite obvious. These activities are learning activities, so it's important to pay attention to the topics we are exploring through this peer learning activity. As you can see on the planned thematic focus to be covered in this peer learning program is always included in the agendas of these webinars. So with this very brief overview, this scheme, we try to look at how we are covering these planned themes so far. At the same time, of course, we recall the cases that have already been discussed with you in July. And those of you who are interested more specifically in some of the themes can then look back at the presentations and materials that are all uploaded in the web pages of these webinars. For example, the wider theme, number 1, which is NQFs in their context, objectives, evolution, scope, types, etc., have always been very well covered from the very first webinar, obviously, and also today will be well addressed. At the same time, what we see is that the topic lifelong learning, recognition of prior learning, or validation des acquis de l'expérience, or recognition and validation, certification of competences, has not been at the center of attention so far, but today it will be. Mauritius, France, and Portugal will exactly talk about this topic. For just another point that can be of use, so the role and the functioning of regional overarching referencing frameworks has been very well presented, especially in the second webinar, the case of ASEAN qualifications reference framework. And also today, Mauritius is also going to talk about the SADC qualifications framework. A theme that is always of great interest for many people, practitioners and experts dealing with qualifications frameworks is the theme of registers, catalogs, databases of qualifications, because these are instruments that are fundamental for the operationalization and visibility, transparency of qualifications frameworks. And this theme has been also very well covered. For example, in the first webinar, we had a very good experience, Slovenia, also in the second with Mozambique, and today the 3 countries are going also to pinpoint and to address this topic. If you are very interested, for example, in governance of the NQF, have a look, for example, at the materials that were shared by Kenya National Qualifications Authority at the first webinar. Yes, this is a very full slide, of course. This slide is about the main features and issues of the 3 cases that were shared at the second webinar of 16th of July. Of course, I'm not going to describe all these bullet points, just a few very important issues and features that came up from the 3 experiences, and you can also afterwards look back at those materials and compare. Let me dedicate a little bit more time to the case of Mozambique National Qualifications Framework, since this was the African experience in the second webinar. So Mozambique is an interesting case in the sense that it is constructing a new integrated and comprehensive qualifications framework. It is designing, it is already, let's say the draft is very advanced, the consultation is going on, and this process is incremental. You all remember Joaquim Mukora underlined this point. It's an incremental process because it builds on the already existing qualifications frameworks, experiences and structures, namely the two existing sectoral frameworks that are in place, higher education and TVET qualifications framework. You will, when you have a moment to look again at the materials of that webinar, that this framework is going to use level descriptors based on the following domains: knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility. So these are very familiar for many of us, domains of learning: knowledge, skills, and autonomy and responsibility. The competence-based approach, the learning outcomes approach for qualifications, is very well rooted in TVET, but it is also gaining ground in higher education. There are credit systems in place for each of the qualifications frameworks, sectoral, and they are different. The credit and the main public online register of qualifications is attached to the TVET qualifications framework of Mozambique. Now, looking very briefly at another case from Asia, the case of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, 10 countries, that has its reference qualifications framework operational. We are not going to go through all these bullet points. Of course, you can afterwards take a look closer, just pinpoint and highlight the most important objectives of this overarching framework for this region of 10 countries. And it is there underlined. So this qualifications framework is a hub, allowing NQFs to talk with each other.
Let's go, Chantal.
It is also, the main purpose is to build an area of trust for mutual recognition, mobility, and support. Looking then very briefly at the European case we had at the second webinar, which was Ireland, the National Framework of Qualifications of Ireland. You have also there the most important features all listed. Maybe just a few minutes of attention to some of the quotes of the presentation of John O'Connor, saying, for example, qualifications system was implicit and the NQF made it explicit. So this is the notion of clarity and transparency that is so important to qualifications, national qualifications frameworks. He also said, never too early to think about evaluation when building and implementing an NQF. This is probably also a very important, let's say, observation. In these recap presentations that we do at the beginning of our webinars, we always mention also some views and questions from participants. And here they are from the second webinar. For example, of course, the question, what is the role, the place, the possibilities of NQFs in the new normal of the COVID-19 era? Another point that came up was values should be part of the level descriptors. There was also some discussion about credit systems, how to make them coherent and some degree of harmonization. Then, of course, a point was made that, in fact, yes, learning outcomes are becoming a focus in many systems. It was also noted by our discussant, who cannot be with you today because he's out of Harare in Zimbabwe for other workshops. He mentioned that it is clearly visible that linkages between subsystems of education and training seem to be increasingly smooth or seamless. And finally, one point was made in the chat box about alignment or referencing what is best suited for Africa. To finalize, to conclude very quickly this initial presentation, let me then remind your own words, your own views that were then captured through the Mentimeter exercise. We will have a similar exercise at the end of today, and please keep your smartphones ready with internet. So this was the first question. The question number one was, which are the 3 key success factors for NQF implementation. And it is very transparent. These are your opinions. It's very clear: reliability, mutual trust, transparency, commitment. These are your own words, your own views. The second question was, it is said that national qualifications frameworks contribute to transparency of qualifications. What does this mean exactly? And it is also very visible that many voted, the majority voted for the option, for the response that is, qualifications are based on clear learning outcomes. And this is a very important point you are making, you participants. This is what contributes to transparency. Finally, the last question was, what are the main benefits, in your view, of the ACQF for the African people? And these are also your views. I think mobility comes out very strongly, as well as harmonization, but also, of course, recognition, employability we see, and lifelong learning. There is also an important word there in French, mutualisation, meaning sharing, unifying. This is also an important point you have made concerning this question. And so now we move directly to session 2, and we pass the floor immediately to our colleague Robin, Director of Mauritius Qualifications Authority. I stop the sharing, and Robin, you have the floor. You can then share your screen and start. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, bon après-midi, et bonjour. So these are the only two words I'm going to say in French. The rest will be in English. I'm sure it will be translated and it will be easy for everybody to understand. I hope everybody can hear me. I shall soon start sharing my screen just to tell you about this presentation, which is about the journey of the Mauritian NQF and its gradual implementation. We chose an incremental approach, very, very slowly, and very important also, we looked for consensus of all people around, and more importantly, to get their engagement and make sure that they understand what we are doing. So without much ado, let me share the screen and start the presentation.
Come on, see what happened to my flash. Okay, it's scattered here. It's a new flash. Can you help me, Michael? It's in eyes. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, everybody. Hope you can see my screen. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right, so I shall proceed on this basis. So as I said earlier, we have been around for quite some time now, some 70 years ago. But let me say that the initial years were very, very slow in taking off. All of it came about with the need to address a particular problem in our education and training landscape. And Mauritius being a country where we have people of varied origins, such as from different parts of Africa, of Europe, of India, China, and so on, we tend to have qualifications from which we have inherited from various places and different kinds, predominantly from England and France. So did the appellations of qualifications, which caused a great deal of confusion. Let me show you some of the qualifications that we had. And you have there certificates, diplomas, professional diplomas, higher diplomas, intermediate, and so on. So much so that we we were having what we call, or what was called at the time, a jungle of qualifications. And that's what it was really about, very confusing. Hence, this confusion around qualifications, and we felt that there was a need for us to look at the national qualification framework. And it is in this context that the idea of setting up an NQF was first mooted, and it led in 2003 with the advent of the Mauritius Qualifications Authority. Basically, the NQF is about classification of qualifications. That was the first bit about it. And this was according to set criteria for levels of learning achieved. Secondly, the idea was to improve understanding of education and training system and the progression routes and access to different parts of the system. And of course, international comparability across borders, because from Mauritius, people have tended to go abroad to go and study, or workers moving around for going for employment and so on. So with this in mind, the NQF was, shall I say, put together as a 10-level framework with certificate of primary education as an entry level, number 1, and going up to all the various qualifications up to level 10, the PhD doctorate. You will notice that we have kept the 3 strands side by side, if I may say: primary, secondary education, TVET workplace, and tertiary education or higher education. And of course, behind there's the set of level descriptors, each defined in terms of the progressive stages of achievement and outcomes and complexity of skills applicable. So eventually, the NQF was used for various functions. For example, if you look at the different functions there, first is the one regarding standard settings at different levels. Initially, it was more for the TVET area. Second, we have the NQF used for recognition and equivalence of qualifications, where for all recognition of qualification, there was a level assigned, say for equivalence. We use NQF for accreditation of programs. Also, when we did the registration of training institutions, there was NQF, and then also for recognition of prior learning. I just draw an aside here talking about registration of training institutions. We even used NQF in particular there for when we were what we called registering individually all the trainers within institutions, and we assigned a level up to which they can be allowed to teach. So it was more about registration of trainers, given a level for them to be able to teach at that particular level. So what were the intended benefits of the NQF at that time when it was set out? Of course, like common everywhere, we find this parity of esteem between academic and vocational qualifications. I'm glad that it was not so much there before, and it is coming very slowly and almost in a natural manner, I would say, but it is happening in a good way. Second, it's about the pathways, education and training, how to pick very clear pathways. Third is about comparability of standards. This is under the NQF. It's about, especially with when we come to international benchmarking. Again, also regarding facilitating access, mobility, and progression within the systems. More about international recognition, especially for vocational qualifications, which is lesser known, awarded in Mauritius. Quality improvement and accountability in the system, and also to enhance the quality of learning and training. Which brings me to what is the governance behind the National Qualifications Framework, and what are the instances that look at the NQF or are responsible for the NQF. So at the very top, the NQF is under the Ministry of Education, but then managed to its operating arm, the Mauritius Qualifications Authority, which has a board at the top where there is a parity between the public and private sector in terms of partnership and equal representation at very high level. And that's under the Ministry of Education. And this is followed by industry committees, which are there for setting the standards primarily, and because it's very important that there's industry behind the exercise. And also when we look at the operational side, when we are registering providers to give these qualifications, or even the accreditation of all the training programs, there's the accreditation committee. And also when you look at the quality aspects, the quality audit panels, all of these have equal representation, both from the public and private sector. In particular, the last one in the audit, we have more of the education people and industry people together to effect the audit of the whatever is happening at all levels. So even from the development of qualifications to the provision of training and learning, up to the assessment, all there we have the quality audit panels. With regard to the NQF, what we are witnessing now is the change happening very, very slowly, and it's very interesting that I share this with you. There is a shift from what the NQF was there before on the periphery of things happening, but it's now moving into the mainstream of education and training. I don't know how to explain this in better detail, but I'll try to say that with the reforms that are being undertaken currently at primary, secondary level, or even higher education or in TVET sector, you find that the NQF is coming out in a very big way to be used as almost as the backbone of what is happening, but it is more and more present in the discourse, more and more present where people are constantly now at all levels of learning, continually referring to the qualifications framework, whereas before it was more or less the TVET area that was closer to the NQF, and that's where we initially started from. And with that, we have also seen more and more widespread adoption of the learning outcomes approach. Again, the TVET people were first to go towards that, and now we're increasingly seeing in higher education, this is already happening. Especially, we have started with the engineering profession, with the Washington Accord and all that. We are seeing now in all other learning at higher education, this is happening too. So this is one very good thing around the NQF. And also very important we've seen is this commonly agreed credit system, whereas there were subsystems, if I may say, before, more particularly started again in the TVET area. We are seeing it happening also now, get the conversation going around to have an agreed credit system. And this is a very interesting area of work that we are doing currently. So whereas the focus has been mainly on the TVET sector, where national qualifications have developed in a big way, this has happened within the TVET area for various sectors. Let me share with you, for example, a series of qualifications or national certificates in the tourism and hospitality area, which is what we started off initially. Remember, Mauritius is a tourist destination, not doing very well at the moment with COVID and all that, and not to mention the oil spill that we just had, very bad. We still have our borders closed, but we are using, in fact, the opportunity to do a lot of work around qualifications in this area, tourism and hospitality. And this is just one example of a series of qualification in this area. Number one, contributor to GDP, tourism and hospitality. The second one would be, for example, in the ICT area, a series of qualifications they are developed. ICT is also a big industry in Mauritius now. these qualifications, you'll easily obtain them from our registers, which we have developed. And the registers will give out full information, what are these qualifications about, the learning outcomes, the performance criteria and range statement, and so on, whatever there is in the components of qualification. So with this in mind, let me now move on to another topic that is of interest, that will be interest to the RPL, because all the qualifications that we have, aside from going through the provider route where teaching and learning takes place, we have also now introduced the recognition of prior learning, which is something which is started out again in the tourism and hospitality management area. That is because there are many people who are experienced in these professions, and they needed qualifications. So that's why we started tourism and hospitality as a first area where we would be doing the RPL. So we had a initial model. It's a bit complicated, so I won't go into the detail. Let me say some of the revisions that we have done around this. So now we have a 4-step process in the RPL, and the 4 of them are pre-application, pre-screening, facilitation, and assessment. Right. So what we have added there is the pre-application. You know, RPL, as we have experienced it, is very difficult, especially for people who may have dropped out of school and have gone to work and don't have formal qualifications per se, which is what it's meant for. But you see, they have this difficulty when they come forward for application. So we put a step called pre-application, and it is where we offer guidance, or we literally handhold people to understand what this process is about before they actually come into the pre-screening, where the application is formally put forward. And so this pre-application is something very, very important for us. Otherwise, if we don't do this correctly or properly, then we have found that there are lots of dropouts in this process. So this new part there has helped us greatly in accompanying our candidates for RPL into the pre-screening. And when it comes to facilitation, it's about this portfolio development, where designated facilitators are assigned to candidates to accompany them in the process of developing their portfolio. And this also has been quite a difficult area, because if it is not done properly, then we have witnessed quite a few people who drop out and cannot make it to the assessment. And of course, coming to the assessment itself, we have had very good examples of assessment that has been done in the tourism and hospitality area. In fact, many of the people who have come out of the RPL process in this sector in particular have been found to be very, very good in the work that they do eventually when going back to their own employment area. So these 4 process steps in this process now has been done to enable RPL to happen. And I must say that now if we have started with RPL at sort of a middle level of the framework, at say level 3 of the national qualifications framework, 3 out of from the 10 levels, which is somewhere slightly at the middle. We have the next step we are doing now is we are moving to higher levels with regard to the RPL, because we have found to be quite useful to give opportunity to people who are, say, at the supervisory or middle management level, who have a lot of experience. Some people are very, very well experienced in the tourism area, for example. In the you find some chefs or executive chefs, for that matter, who have reached such high level and very proficient, but do not have this formal qualification. And once they do have the qualification, they can move on to more managerial positions, of course, with further learning and so on. So this is a very good move that has taken place with regard to moving to higher levels of the NQF. So currently, we're at level 3. We have moved up to 4, 5, up to level 6, which is a diploma level of the NQF. This is one good thing that has happened. The next one is also funding support. Whereas before candidates had to pay for their own to be able to access the RPL process. Now we have come up with a funding mechanism where this is completely free. In fact, in Mauritius, education is all free at all levels for all students. RPL was not. So we have now been able to secure funding that allows RPL candidates to access this scheme totally free. We also, by the way, have transport, which is free in this the free education system in Mauritius. So this is around RPL. The next thing I want to talk about is the key milestones of the NQF, therefore, in this journey, like I said earlier, how we have moved very, very slowly, stepwise in different things. Right, in the first instance, in the development of qualifications, what was there before as national trade certificate? Well, it's not just a change of name to national certificate, it's the learning outcomes approach has been used significantly, in fact, totally in this area. So that was a major step in the beginning of the putting up of the framework with regard to the learning outcomes. Second is there is a whole quality assurance system that goes behind this the whole NQF. Whether you take development of qualifications, whether you take, for example, the delivery of delivery of training within the institutions, there is a new quality assurance system that we have put up with. And in fact, it gives responsibility to the institutions with regard to their own governance, with regard to how they conduct learning, assessment, learner feedback, and so on. It's all behind a quality assurance system, which then of which there is an audit that is done around. The other thing is which you just talked about is regarding the introduction of an RPL system. I just spoke about it. This is new, and in fact, we are having an enhanced system now with a new step that I just added, and also with the funding support. What is interesting also is the growing network that we have with MOUs with foreign countries. And in the course of the work, we have sort of met many colleagues from different countries, and we have sort of shared experiences, whether nearer home within the Indian Ocean, like Seychelles or Madagascar, or even further across in Africa, SADC, in first instance in Africa. And we have also gone as far as in the Caribbean with one particular country, the Barbados, which we got to work together around what was called the transnational qualifications framework, which is one around for small island states within the Commonwealth. There was a TQF framework there, and for which we have also done some referencing. And the work we do with Barbados is in that context. So we are sharing experiences with other countries and learning also a lot on the way things are done to be able to put in practice in Mauritius. And also a big exercise was in our own region, the SADC, the exercise done with respect to the SADCQF. And here this has been a very good, how shall I say, good journey for us to be able to do this exercise, because it has allowed us to do some rethinking ourselves in line with what were there as criteria that were required for alignment with the SADCQF. Let me just very quickly go through all of them. See, so it looks at what are the responsibilities of the relevant national bodies that look at the NQF. There's also the link between the NQF levels and the descriptors at SADCQF. Then how far the NQF is based on learning outcomes and the credit systems, transparency of procedures, including on the NQF. All these are criteria. The QA system, the agreement of the relevant QA bodies within the country, and the competent national bodies that certify alignment of the NQF with the SADC. This is an important one because it's very important also that all the bodies that are concerned do certify, and it goes very high level in the country, even up to the top level of government at the level of cabinet. So what the methodology, I won't go through in detail with that, but basically it's about having a committee at the national level. You do a self-assessment exercise and produce a report based on evidence. And then of course, there is a submission of this report and the approval process that takes place at the level of SADC. And lastly, therefore, it's published on the official platform. What this gives us in terms of outcome is that I just mentioned official platform where it's published. And secondly, eventually, then we will use all our documentation, the relevant SADC level, which we will mention in this document, our documentation. So in a way, this is also quite similar, probably quite similar to what type of work that we will probably be called upon to do for the African region, all of Africa. And this allows us, therefore, for all the mobility that will take place between the people who go for work or for further learning within here for SADC within the region in the community. So I have come to I just wanted to add a little bit very quickly regarding the COVID situation. Of course, like in many countries which was very badly affected, fortunately Mauritius, we are now COVID safe. We haven't had any for the past 3-4 months now, although our borders remain closed for the time being. Anybody coming in has to go to quarantine and so on. The thing is, the COVID situation has also forced us now to look at the way we do things in terms of going online, going for assessment online, and it will affect in many ways. Something we will have to talk about in greater detail, but it will be part of the NQF as well. So this brings me therefore to the end of the presentation. In case there are any questions, then we'll be able to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robin. I think we should all give a round of applaudissements because it was a very clear, pertinent presentation. Thank you. Now we have immediately time for some questions and answers. And I know the colleagues from Sierra Leone had 1 or 2 questions they wanted to immediately ask during this initial moment. Please, Director, would you like to ask 1 or 2 questions that are important for Sierra Leone process, current process? Please, you can unmute your microphone and speak.
Thank you very much. It's a very good presentation. I was privileged to go on a study tour to Mauritius in 2007, and one institution we visited was the Mauritius Qualifications Authority. so each time we are discussing our Tibet in Sierra Leone, we reference Mauritius. We want to congratulate them. Right.
Thank you.
Right. We in Sierra Leone seem to be in a hurry. There are our superiors who want us to have an NQF within the next couple of months. Now, having gone to Mauritius, I know there are procedures, there are systems, but is there a way we can have a shortcut so that we learn from all the countries? We combine all the ideas from the countries so that we have a shortcut, because bosses are on our heads for us to have this in a couple of months? Or is this straightforward, not possible in a couple of months? Question number one. Go ahead, then I can go on to the next question.
Okay, I just would like to say thank you very much. This is a very interesting fundamental question. You remember the graph I showed in the beginning? Many of the countries on the continent are at the stage of early thinking, development and consultation. So your question is really incredibly just practical and to the point. Thank you very much. Let us then ask Robin for an opinion about this. And naturally, throughout these webinars, we will be talking about this question. Thank you. Robin, would you have a view?
I can only say that it is a journey, as I started, a journey that takes quite a bit of time. And every journey that's long starts with a single step. And I started by saying we needed consensus and also going incremental and getting engagement of people. And that is what really takes time. If you know the destination, then you can start the steps. So what is also difficult is, so what is a destination? Where do we want to go? That is something that can be talked about before taking that single step. But my own view is that it is not feasible in very short time, to be very honest. It's better to go step by step, slowly. And I think it will pick up, almost like a chapter in a book, with chapters unfolding as you walk, as you go through the book, unfolding. That's the way I look at it.
If you have another short question, we can also address it at this moment. You or another colleague.
We would like to...
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour, c'est Mamadou.
Monsieur Mamadou Sarr.
That's Mamadou. Thank you very much.
J'ai la question. D'accord.
Yes, I follow the question. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to write a question. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Any other question now immediately? If not, please write on the chat box. We will have time in the end to reply to questions. Okay. So since we have now concluded then the session 2 that was dedicated to Mauritius National Qualifications Framework, and what was very clear is that this is a journey, as Robin just underlined. The qualifications framework has entered in the new phase. Let's say the challenges, problematic and issues addressed in the beginning have changed in the meanwhile, and therefore also the solutions and the ways to address the new ambitions and aspirations of this framework. Probably this is very important to bear in mind. Frameworks cannot remain static. They evolve, they adjust to new contexts and new demands. Let us then move to session 3. Brigitte Bouquet, she is ready. We see her, and she's going to share her screen. And Brigitte is going to present in French, and you will also see the presentation in French. But of course, please, you have, of course, the interpretation. And of course, you have also all the presentations on the web link of this webinar. And this presentation is available in English, French, and Portuguese. Brigitte, whenever you want, you can share your screen.
You see them?
Pas encore.
Ah.
Donc, tu dois utiliser le bouton vert en bas, Share Screen.
Oui, je l'ai.
Oui, avec la présentation.
C'est bon là?
La présentation, tu l'ouvres, tu cliques le Share Screen. Vas-y.
C'est fait.
C'est l'apprentissage. Hein?
Non, non, c'est fait.
C'est fait. Sinon, pour ne pas... On peut aussi faire le share screen de notre côté et puis tu nous diras de changer les slides, si tu veux. Tu veux essayer encore?
Ouais. Parce que moi, je vois ma présentation. Hein.
OK. Donc, tu dois cliquer encore Share. Hein, quand tu es sur la présentation, déjà, tu cliques encore une fois Share. On ne voit pas ta présentation.
Je suis désolée.
Aucun problème.
We're not seeing your presentation, unfortunate. Sorry. I don't understand why.
So we can also do it for you, Brigitte.
I'm sorry.
Ah, ça va, très bien, excellent.
Yes, that is there already. That's excellent.
Très bien, tu peux y aller.
Yes, we see that. That's good. Go on. Thank you very much, and excuse me for this technical problem. I would like to try to present to you the French framework. Earlier on, I was going to present to you a little bit of our system because
Le cadre national,
the national framework is something, but then in terms of a landscape, there are a lot of certifications. That is professional certifications, micro certifications, and we have a lot of things in each country.
Notre idée depuis
and our idea right from the beginning in France is not to put everything in our national framework. In our national qualification framework, only those who need a level that will have to be put in there. And so as and when we continue, we realize that it will be better for us to probably talk with Portugal and then see that there could be diplomas or certifications, there could be some other issues and other systems, but there were some that deserve a level because we can compare them to other certifications because they were corresponding to our concept of a national framework. And then we had also certifications and training programs that were very important for the market, job market, but they did not have necessarily all the characteristics to have a level as such. And so we have, for some years now in France, a system that is a national framework for certifications that is for the level of the national framework. That is a level that we call a specific framework, for instance, rehabilitations on what we call licenses and what we need for buildings that are quite high enough, but that are not necessarily constitute a market as such, because ours is our framework, which is called professional certification, and which is rather meant for the job market. And so we record professional certifications with a level of qualification. And this recording can only be done when the certifications are written in such a way that they allow us to organize them in a way that there would be a validation of experience acquisition. And so that is an obligatory condition, except professions like doctors and nurses and others, where we don't have a validation of the acquisition of possible experiences. And so we have to look at the diplomas and the certifications for or that, and we cannot claim to put that in the national framework. And so these repertoires, that's we can say on the national framework, we have a professional certification that could be delivered or issued by the ministries, the professional branches, and completely private organizations. And then so it is not because we have an orientation towards the job market that the training of higher education certificates constitute a part of the framework. On the other hand, the objectives for the Ministry of Higher Education is to be able to coordinate as much as possible the degrees of higher education meant for the job market and also for the recruitment of students when they have their certificates or their diplomas, when they have an academic nature, or to let them be a part of the process, including quality assurance as well. And so we have a system which is an ascendant system. It means there should be a pre-established model which is for professional certification and like Masons. And then we can also have certification which is not the same or not having the same perimeters or the same aspects. And the system that that can be proposed to us is about the modalities for new certifications. We have a system which is also peculiar. That is to say, there are some countries, as we have a type of a training organization which can only issue a type of certification. But for us, that's not the case. We can have certifications that are indeed delivered by universities. And then, for instance, which is a very good training organization, but at the same time, the diplomas that have a grade of a master's or first degree, but they produce a lot of professional certificates. And each time, each certification is going to be examined for it to be written in the national context. And that means that we do not have the system of awarding bodies. An institution can be excellent to issue a type of certification where there is a certification in a particular area. It's not, however, for all these certifications that will be considered as having the quality that is desired. And so for those who are certificating the private or public sector, it is each certificator that is referred to here. But on the other hand, the system is open to every type of certificator that satisfies the conditions imposed by the law. And so we have in our framework diplomas that are of private origin, and then certifications that are from international angles, and then diplomas that deal with higher education and other ministries. We are not at all in a framework that is reserved to the academic system. Right from the beginning, there have been other types of certificators. We have had, for instance, the Chamber of Trades or Handicraft. On the other hand, there should be conditions that are stated by the law. And so these are conditions that protect or that try to protect the final users of kind of cheating, or just to talk about it that way. That's to be sure that we ensure some form of sustainability of institutions that issue certifications. And we are no more in that kind of a register. And also, we also have prerequisite systems that will have to be satisfied. And we have had, at the end of the year 2018, a law that reformed professional training, and it had an impact on the system of training, which created a new national framework. This national framework enables one to create um, what we have amongst the certifications, which is much easier now than all the certifications, and also for the national side, and also for what is constituted as a block of competence. And so, and also in France, we have a kind of a homogeneity or homogenization of certifications, where one could be could record this, or and then we look at the database, and the certification should be defined by 3 referentials, including for higher education, even if it is more complicated for higher education. But there should be a reference of activity that describes working situations and the activities that accompany it. And also there should be a reference of skills to identify the skills, including cross-cutting competencies or skills, cross-cutting ones. And also we also must also have an evaluation referential which defines the criteria and the modality of evaluation of these skills. And so we have a system where competency is acquired or it is not acquired. It is either black or white, a bit of that. And so the system of evaluation will have to be able to say, yes, the skill is acquired. And so if you want to say, it is the freedom of the certificator is that the person has it or has not got it. And so that is all the type of skills. The skills that we assess or that we describe in France as in a combinatory way, that is to know that it is something that is acquired. And so these are 2 first referentials that are very extremely important, 2 baselines to look at the acquisition of experiences. The BAE is what is peculiar to the French framework, and which is to be able to, it's a process that helps one to receive the same certification as the same that is received through continuous training. But then this is also right from the beginning, since its existence, it is indeed attached to the national French system, thanks to the description of certifications by 3 baselines, that is skills and evaluation. And so for the validation of the acquisitions, they are different. We are obliged to constitute juries, and also there is, of course, as the law states, an obligation for the presence of the professional, because it is the professional that can better understand what the candidate is going to explain, looking at the framework of activities, the type of skills being developed, and then that is what one has to do with one's documentation. And also for the other modalities of evaluation, there the jury must supply the indications to the person when they have a partial validation. To say, for instance, that for a degree of higher education, we see the whole part of the degree that you envisage. But on the other hand, can you prepare a thesis or a long essay for us to know what we have by way of synthesis on what you have on one of the characteristics of the academic degree? And so we look at it and then we say, yes, you have this or that, but we can indeed fully say, we're not able to give you this certification. You should be able to train yourself on this or other aspect of certification. And as I can tell you, there are other forms of certifications, and in particular, we are trying to work on the training and in terms of on the working space and then working indication, and then we can look at analysis of what is looked at the training, and then looking at what we can do in those slides. The baselines that I've talked about are indeed are accessed by the public, and then also and what type of certification that we have orientation on, and also we can also see what we can do with terms of a certification and a system of accompaniment to see whether it is too long into writing it today.
Brigitte, Brigitte, tu m'entends? S'il te plaît, je voudrais te demander,
Brigitte,
tu es
I would like to
exactement
ask
à
you,
quelle slide?
you'll have to tell us on what slide you are. Okay, slide 4. And I want to...
Okay. Ok. Tu dois, parce que je voulais juste dire qu'au fait,
I just want to say that it is not...
ce n'est pas ta présentation qu'on est en train
It
de
is
voir.
not your presentation that we are seeing.
C'est Erika, notre collègue,
It is
qui est en train de
Erika, our
faire
colleague,
partage.
who is
Donc,
trying to share.
Chaque fois que tu changes de slide,
And so each time that you change a slide,
il faudra dire next slide.
you
Comme
have
ça,
to
elle
say so and
pourra
so
changer
slide, so that we can
correctement.
change it correctly. No, I'm sorry. I thought it was functional that way. So,
Tu es au slide 4, c'est bon
so
maintenant.
slide 4. Let's move to 5.
Au slide 5. Okay.
Let's move to... That is perfect. So, another characteristic of a new framework is that we have an obligation
découper les certifications
to cut the certifications in blocks of skills which contribute to the autonomous exercise of professional activity. I know there are a lot of systems that use credits or credit points or certifications, or what we call a partial certification. In some systems we have that, and so, but that is not absolutely the case. In France, the block of skills is something that helps one to function in an autonomous way with a part of a certification. For instance, when you we can have a technical evolution. We can also have the block of skills that evolve. That is to say, they enable one to conserve the interest of the certification that correspond to a trade or a profession in a higher education sometimes. But that also helps one not to review the whole certification, but then there is a part that functions. And so the aim of this block of skills is to improve upon the understanding of that, and then what we can acquire little by little for a qualification, and then we end up with the training and validation of experiences, and also to help with the evolution of the certification. That also helps that is a bit complicated because generally some of the certificates, it helps to create passageways. But then the law of 2018 gave to the new commission that is in charge of professional certification the possibility of asking the certificators that have close certifications, because we see that a block of skills are quite close, so they can create passageways, and so they can ask it once or 3 times. If the certificator doesn't want to cooperate, they can withdraw the certification concerned and of the national repertoire. It means we will have we take away the level of the national framework.
Slide 6, please.
Slide 6, please. Now.
Donc, pour améliorer
to improve upon transparency of certification, we have two types of access to ONCP. That is one which is what is a procedure which at least at each time when there's a dialogue between the state and the social partners, and also that could be from represent a sector or what we say what is intersectoral, that is a social partners that discuss the certification. If not, they cannot have a level that is awarded. And so in the recording of the rights, it is a ministerial decree which is going to give the level to the certification after either from the interministerial commission, from the social partners, or from the higher education, or after the opinion of the commission, where I have put it in a plural because where we have social partners and representatives of universities and students. And for higher education, we have different types of certification and different types of certification. And each time we have dialogue that have to be instituted with and between all the stakeholders. And then for higher learning, the new law introduced something original. That is a commission examines the creation of the university degree. That is a university degree, which is a grade. And this commission will have to discuss and then take a report that is developed by a professor of university and a representative of the socioeconomic world. And so for the degrees that are issued by awarded by universities, this is something obligatory or compulsory. Before the signing of the decree, we had procedures of accreditation that are a little bit different for engineers and master's level, or for the schools and then of management when they have a grade or a level that is given by the Ministry of Higher Education. We have another type of recordings which is upon demand, and France competence or France skills looks at the certification. We have a commission at the headquarters where with the social partners, where within France competence as an institution, the director general cannot come back to the decisions of this commission. The only thing that he can say that I cannot do that, I don't want to sign it, and in this case, he justifies why he cannot sign, and he cannot. There can be a litigation on that, and so that is the way it goes. And so we have this commission, which relatively is independent, and the minister, when the law came into force, tried to say that this commission should be independent. And so these certifications could have a level, and that can be signed by the Director General of France competence, but then it is, of course, as the level is acknowledged by the state, that should be published in the official journal of the French Republic. And so slide number 7, please. 7. Thank you. And so we come back to the framework, probably to answer the colleague's question that he just asked.
Un processus en France.
We have a process in France, which is a process that is very slow. we had 72 in 2002, an implicit framework based on the duration of a training. And in 2002 to 2018, we had a new system which used we try to use the skills and the acquisitions of the learning, and which was largely structured by the law of the obligation of validation of experiences. And so we also had 5 levels. We had in reality the describer, which was implicit, and because we were working a lot on discussions of consensus. So among the French, they understood one another. It was much more complicated when you were to make it to be understood outside. And so this is always on a social consensus. And so that was built up empirically. It was not instituted in the text or restored in the text. And so the criteria for inscription there also, we have the object of an agreement, which was not indeed written in the legal text. So we finished in 2019 by taking a new framework, which also is deeply linked to the work that we've done with the European Commission, with the 3 describers, and then criteria that are indeed explicitly explained by the text. But the national framework, the law that indeed brought up that marked the strong differentiation that we do in France between the quality of the training and the quality of the certification. The recording in the national framework enables us to provide very strong signs on the training, but there is still a whole process of quality assurance of higher education or professional training, which was fixed by the law, and which deals with the fact that now it is the institutions that issue the professional training up to the end, also for higher education, that will constitute the object of the level of what we call a COFRAC. But in reality, the COFRAC is linked to international organizations of quality assurance. So we have 2 parties that have 2 parts that are important: the quality of the training and the quality of the certification. On page 8. And so we have a whole new framework. We haven't had the blessing of the European Commission to have their baseline, but then that was in February, but not in November, that we're going to present our criteria for the baselines to the European Commission. And so our framework, and so for the levels, except that the strength of France, that we've neutralized level 1 because we were not really in agreement. And you can see in our descriptions, we agreed among us to say that the job market was a bit complicated, so we did it otherwise. But in our context, at a national level, there are indeed constant elements. We did for the training and the certification to look at indeed the professional training that we agreed on, not to write it as the general training on maternal to the baccalaureate. Baccalaureate for us, it is the first university grade, and that is the high school has its own level. And so we classified this in another framework, a level of a qualification, but then an area of activity. And so according to the nomenclature, French nomenclature, there are specializations of training that are a bit different from ISCED side, but that is indeed linked to the job market plus education. We also have the will of promoting parity of estimates of other types of professional certifications, but that have been right from the beginning. I would say we talk about handicraft, the professions, and it had always been something that has been a constant aspect of our system of classification of certifications. Now, a new novelty, a great novelty in 2009, all the general high school or baccalaureate, we indeed said that in France, when we say you're going to have the baccalaureate level, that they accepted to give a level 4 for the general baccalaureate. And also number 8, we will have in the national repertoire, particular sheets for the professional baccalaureate. I will talk to you a little bit about our framework or our describers framework, and that is to the know, to know and the know-how, and then self-reliance and responsibility. And each time we have a definition of what the describer puts in the field. And also we took for a very, very long time to get accepted things that could appear quite not detailed, particularly on the general knowledge. In France, we ask the first question, if we want to put the describer that will be around knowledge. And so we did it for the first time without the knowledge. It was a bit provocative, the National Commission of Professional Certification, and so the ministries and the social partners all reacted to that. And we put in, indeed, the describer of knowledge, but then it was quite deep. But then that was between the higher education and the group, and then between the representative of a national group and then the small and also the explanations that we have on the descriptor, what a descriptor want to say, and also for certifications that were coming directly from the job market, and which did not have an aspect that was rather academic. And so each time, the words that were used, there is a consensus that was created so that people will understand the same thing. And then for the know-how, it was a bit easy, and for the part on the responsibility and autonomy and the self-reliance, we quickly, the consensus was arrived at very easily, because there were some other reactions and organization of the work. And so we did descriptors which were indeed adapted to our context. And so to understand how that works, the descriptors will have to be read vertically and horizontally. That is to say, there are 2 entry points. So to have the level you are going to read, a general knowledge of the know-how and self-reliance, and now you also have to contextualize it in what is below, and then as compared to what is above. That is to say that we cannot have this something which has a level, and the level will have to be found in terms of what is below. A doctorate is more complicated, but to situate it in a dynamic.
On peut passer peut-être au...
And so we can probably move on to. And so you probably you have seen or not seen the level 1 descriptor. So, or the level, we say that level 1 is about the basic knowledge, which is dealing with something in the area of education where there is really the acquisitions to have access to the market or job market. And then you're asking something which was too difficult for our job market to indeed describe. And so these are the various evolutions in the framework or the describers of the framework. And then we wanted to integrate or include the teamwork and the capacity of management. If you can go to the next slide.
Merci, voilà. Et donc, voilà.
And so,
Et
I can leave you to read that, and each time we have
on a toujours travaillé dans la progression.
We have always worked in the progress of the descriptors, and also we had to introduce something that characterizes in France the master's grade or level is the cultural context and what is national, and so each time we try to balance it between what is the various types of certification which are in our framework. We can, that is part of our vocabulary. But then when we look at the descriptors, we see we lean much more on what could be differentiated and what we could approach. And then we have succeeded in finding this part which brought in the multicultural aspect and to look at what was going on beside us and to comment on the level of the framework and to an introduction of the multicultural and the multinational aspects in the last level of our framework.
Oui, bah, on passe à la...
We can move on to very quickly France. We have bordering countries, so we work a lot with the neighboring countries. What we call the Great Region of that is Germany, Luxembourg, and Belgium for the use of the European framework. How to work on the professional branches and then how to work in our system where we have international activities that we start to even work in terms of describers of the European context of certification. And also we use the certificators and also those of the European context and what we have done and also to say and to see in the context of the handicraft, to say that that's what we wanted to say, to establish a trust between the various certificators, even if the levels were not the same. And then the descriptor is to be able to help in the international project. And the last slide, please. And so on COVID.
Il faut dire Covid et autres types.
What should we say? It's another type of event, a similar one which can occur. And as you can see, there is a difference between the training and the certification. And we have had an impact on the training side or the didactic side, but that has not had an impact on the framework side. But we had to effectively modify for the certificators a system of evaluation. And also for this framework, as we are quite open and that we have put, for instance, the certification that is done by our National Center for Long Distance Learning, but we observe, on the other hand, that we should indeed put in place a common doctrine. That is to say, on evaluation, at a long distance evaluation, and also given the way in which we record this demand. I don't have the time to explain to you in detail, but we do the statistics of the holders of such degrees, and also the person that has taken the economic risk to do his certification, and that has had his certification. Then we ask proofs to support the level. There we run the risk of having a problem given the unemployment that had come, and so they will have to be forced to work differently on the analysis to be able to have their reintegration into work, which is obviously slow, probably with the level of that will correspond to the qualification that would have happened if they had had a normal training in the economy, for instance. And so this is my last slide. I thank you very much for listening. And I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Shall we give a reaction of applaudissement to Brigitte? Est-ce qu'on va applaudir Brigitte? Merci beaucoup, Brigitte. Tu as partagé avec nous beaucoup de manière très détaillée et approfondie l'évolution.
It's in a very detailed form on the evolution of your framework and the peculiarities of your French framework. Thank you very much. Given our time, I would like us to go directly to the third session, which will be done in Portuguese, and that will be dedicated to the national context, and so to the.
We will now have the Portuguese National Qualification Framework from Teresa Duarte. Teresa Duarte, please get ready to share your presentation.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Teresa,
yes, we do have your presentation on the screen. Teresa, please use less than 30 minutes. We are running behind. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this session to share with you the experience of Portugal in our national qualification framework and the instruments under our national qualification framework. First, I will give you a context with regard to our national qualification framework. Our framework was established under the reform that was carried out in 2017. This is when we wanted to increase the qualification level at secondary level, and we wanted to include in the 12th year of education. Among the objectives that came about during this process, I would like to highlight the ones that you can see on the screen. First, we had to strengthen the integration between training within the education system, training within the labor market. Then, Portugal prioritized all that is related to the certification. This means that someone coming from the education system would have two certificates. One certificate which was professional, and the other one was just education certification. This is double certification. On the other hand, we also gave more value all the non-formal education that in Portugal is called RDCC, which is a process of recognition and certification of competencies. Another objective is to give more flexibility in education and training. We then created training unity, short-term training unities that can take from 25 to 50 hours, and which is an independent certification. Other than that, another objective was to strengthen permeability between general education and other pathways. And also we wanted to increase and strengthen the link between the demand and offer. The last objective, which is more important in our national system, was we wanted to have legibility and comparability of national qualifications. Under our national qualification system, we had to create instruments, legal instruments that would support the system. And what you can see from this slide in green is what we had in 2007 under the national qualification system. And in the middle, we have the instruments that continued after 2007, and they were changed in 2017 when we took the reform. If you look carefully, you can see in the second square, we have the national qualification framework when it was established, in parallel with another instrument that I will show you later, which is National Catalogue of Qualifications. When it comes to structures, we had, they were called New Opportunity Centers, which were long life training structures and with which we would validate competencies. And we would have also a network of training providers, as well as the very important in this process. In 2017, responding to the objective that I mentioned, we create a system of anticipation of qualification need in order to adjust between the offer and demand. And we created national credit system, and we integrated it at a higher education level because we had another system there. In 2017, there was a change in the centers related to lifelong training. They were now called qualification centers. We invested in quality assurance related to vocational training. Now, the Portuguese qualification framework, this was created and proposed by three ministries: the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor and Social Solidarity, Ministry of Science, Technology and Higher Education. The proposal was discussed in the National Council of Vocational Training in August and September. This framework, as well as other instruments of national qualification framework, they went through a public consultation. After public consultation, the framework was created in December 2007 based on the European qualification framework. It was then regulated in a specific legislation in July 2009 and entered in force on the 1st of October 2010. The main objective of this framework, the aim is to create a comprehensive framework, integrating all the qualification updates in the with other different education subsystems, such as education, vocational training, higher education. We also wanted to improve the legibility, transparency, and comparability of qualifications. What we had, it was a framework that was implicit, and with this one, now we had a more transparent legibility of the levels and qualifications. Also, the aim was to improve the access of the national qualification and define learning outcomes for each qualification level and ensure coordination with the European qualification framework. These are our key features of our Portuguese qualification framework. And we think this is a comprehensive, it's valuing, integrative, and it's articulated with the European framework. When we say comprehensive, it's because it's only one framework with various subsystems. And from this framework, we can have qualifications with many pathways, not only in terms of education and training, but also those trainings are informal and formal, can be validated. It can be an educational sector validation and also professional validation. It's a framework that takes into account the double certification, giving it more value. When we have a school certification and we also have a professional certification, and we also value the competence, skills, and know-how. It's integrative because we have many modalities. For instance, in secondary education, we include at level 4, that you will see after. We have the professional pathways, and we have other training courses and for adult education. When we say integrative, it's because we have a number of concepts related to knowledge. In Portugal, we took an holistic approach. Competence is not just the mobilization of knowledge obtained in a specific context. It's more than that. The last characteristic is the articulation with the European framework. Our framework also has 8 qualification levels. Level descriptions are similar to the European framework. They take into account learning outcomes. Therefore, the learning outcomes are very well described at each level. Next slide is about the levels, the national framework. As I said, it has 8 levels from 1 to 8. In those, we include basic education, non-higher education, and from 6 to 8, we have higher education. In any of the levels, from 1 to 4, we can have qualification through VCC, from formal and informal training. From level 6 to 8, we can also, not in 8, theoretically yes, but it's difficult in practice. From 6 and 7, we can validate the knowledge at higher education. Level 1 is the second cycle of basic education, 6 years of education. Level 2 is the third cycle of basic education at 9 years. Level 3 is 12 years of education, and in level 3, it's the political decision. We wanted to give more value to the double certification. If someone obtained a level at the standard 12 through academic means, and it will have an education school certification, will have a lower level from someone who's in standard 10,
certificação profissional.
having obtained professional certification. Level 5 concerns is directed to non-higher education, post-secondary non-higher education. Currently, we offer only one option at level 5, which are specialization courses that take for at least one or more than a year. Level 6 is bachelor degree, level 7 master degree, level 8 PhD or doctorate. As you can see, and anyone who is involved in the qualification framework and its implementation can realize that this implementation was faced with some challenges. Some of the challenges highlighted, some of which the challenges, we had to adjust the descriptors that were used in the implicit qualification framework, and we had to adjust them to the descriptors of our national qualification framework, which is not easy. Another challenge that we faced is the learning outcomes in the qualification levels, because there are many approaches, and there are still many approaches, and this needs to be looked at very carefully, because the approaches are so many. It still and remains a challenge. We need to harmonize the approaches. The use of attitude, which integrates autonomy and responsibility instead of competence. It was something that was very well debated. The recommendation of the European framework had a different approach. With the implementation of our framework, there was a need to align it, and something that caused a major debate, it was the difference between level 3 and level 4, because both in the end is someone who is 12 years, it was 12 years of education, and they're having a different certification. Some of the solutions that we used, some of which had to do with the methodology of designing qualification based in learning outcomes. This methodology is still in place, and now in 2020 is being looked at again in order to adjust it, having into account some changes that we want to implement. There was a need to have a support manual in order to make it easy to the implementers, and also for them to be guided with. Now, communication and dissemination activities. We are still investing a lot in the communication dissemination with conferences, workshops, in order to disseminate what the qualification framework is all about. Currently, after 10 years, with the national qualification framework, we do have a framework, a legal framework in place. We do have qualification assigned to levels. We do have quality assurance arrangements implemented. And this is the link that you can use at Europass, comparing the qualification levels with other European countries. We don't have much time. I will not explain what it's all about. You can access the link and you can compare the qualification levels from different countries, so that you having into reference the European qualification framework. In which areas the framework is making more difference? On the other hand, visibility. Portugal has got more certificates and diplomas. Where is the national qualification framework is mentioned? These at lower levels, not higher education. And also the certificates and diplomas, many of them do include the qualification framework and the qualifications. We do have the National Catalogue of Qualification where are contained the national qualification framework in compared with European qualification levels. Now, when it comes to legibility, level descriptors are more clear and accessible to end users, and non-formal and informal learning are more legible. The framework also differentiates when it comes to transparency. We use more and more learning outcome to describe and classify qualification. Level descriptors are used to renew qualification when we design new qualifications and we need competence descriptors, and with the use not only the competence but also the know-how and the skill and the inclusion of new dimension of competence and skills. We used the soft skills, and this is very important when it comes to transparency, involvement. From the beginning, it has been very important to involve the stakeholders in the referring process in 2011. Also, from 2007, when we created the sectoral councils for qualification, we had an important intervention because a qualification is integrated in the national framework without going through the qualification sector, and also we involve stakeholders in the assessment of learning acquired in formal and non-formal settings. Taking into account the relation, I have to talk about the National Catalogue of Qualification. It's an instrument, the strategic management of national double certification at non-higher education, which promotes and promotes flexibility in the obtention of qualifications. National Catalogue of Qualification, I will show you later on. It includes many aspects that are taken into account in the training, EVET, CVET, RVC, VNFL. The validation of knowledge and competence is equivalent to the formal training. There is no difference. There is no difference when it comes to the levels in the certificates, and the catalog, as I said, in text, shows duration training of 25 to 50 hours that can capitalize autonomously and can be transferred between qualification paths. It's a catalog that allows someone to take a pathway in a complete training or take a specific training and slowly complete in a modular training and acquire a specific qualification. The catalog also ensures the connection to the European qualification framework. Currently, the catalog includes 308 qualifications and 47 areas of education and training. If the connections allow, I would like to access this link so you can see the sample of the catalog, national catalog of qualifications. Otherwise, you can access this link and you can see the catalog later on.
No.
I think the connection is not helping very much. Let me move to the next slide. I wanted you to have a glimpse of the catalog, but the connection is not helping.
Vou voltar. Vamos ver. Desculpem este inconveniente.
Apologies for the connection. When I was trying to access the link, I lost my screen sharing. Can you please share your screen? Yes, I'm working on it.
Teresa, do you want me to share the presentation?
Maybe. Let me try again, please.
Yes.
Let me try. Yes, I think it's better. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, please.
It's the slide 14, please. Well, maybe I can speak to have more time. Portanto, vou continuar. Queria-vos falar apenas, portanto, apesar de já ter feito muito.
I wanted to talk about the Sectoral Council for Qualifications, which are a platform of updating, revising the national qualification framework, and it joins stakeholders from both worlds. And we do have a sector council for each sector. What are the members of these councils? They are coordinated by the National Agency of Qualification and Higher Education, but it includes members such as ministries, training institutions, reference enterprises. They have 10 members that can be called upon to intervene when it comes to competence and qualifications. There is no qualification that can be integrated in the framework without being looked at by the sectoral councils.
Thank you. Bom, falar-vos pouco então do RDCC.
Now I will talk about VNFIL, which the validation of training was created in 2000. We were
RVCC.
This is the RVCC. This the assessment the validation is also possible at higher education. At a higher level, we can allow people with more than 24 years to be integrated in education. They still have autonomy to acquire knowledge. At the early stage, after the qualification, there are more complicated cases. The validation is only possible if someone has got more than 1/3 of the total number of ACTs of a degree. The RVCC
praticamente
has been created and is specific to our country. We have validation centers which are called qualifica centers for people beyond 18 years. People aged between 18 and 23 years must have 3 years of a certified experience so that they can be integrated in the recognition system of competence recognition. This system is free of charge and is for all adults living in Portugal. Qualifica centers
It's possible to have the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Os centros qualifica
the qualifica centers, they obey a number of stages in order to ascertain competencies. From a training, a person, we are having sound interruptions. We are having interruptions. If you could bear with us, it's not clear at all. We are having interference. The qualifica centers include various kinds of knowledge from education, professional and vocational, from level 1 to 4, and allow education and training pathways. This, I won't go into detail of this metrics, but there is enrollment, diagnosis of competencies, then there is information and guidance. Later on, the adult goes through a referral to other training or education or recognition and validation of competencies. Recognition and validation can take up to 50 hours of training. And then the individual can get a total certification or a partial certification. In this case, we must have a personal qualification plan, which implies that he must go through another training.
Agora este último slide.
I wanted to give you a glimpse in this last slide, a glimpse of RVCC. We do have 2 referrals, one for the basic education.
Estas áreas de competência, que são linguagem e comunicação, matemática para a vida, cidadania.
In this area, we have mathematics, communication, and other competencies. But we also do professional standards at secondary level. Then we have the professional standards that they are all included in our qualification system. I will not go into detail, but you can access through the documents that have been shared. I wanted to conclude with one more slide and let you know about how qualification framework and COVID-19. This is a matter of interest for us all. It's affecting us all. You can look at my presentation later on, but I'm trying to tell you our reactions since our first cases in March, what measures our government took and implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. from March, all education facilities and schools were closed, and we had to undertake online education. Students, teachers had to now adopt digital learning. When I say that all the schools were closed, this is may not be true. One of the schools was one of the schools in each territory was open in order to accommodate students with vulnerability or underprivileged people or people in need. Under this digital schooling, we implemented a project that had been in place a long time ago, which is tele-school. We started broadcasting school lessons through national TV in order to address the inequalities among our communities through the television. And this was very successful. This has been a success story, and our government announced just recently, because the school year is going to start again. So we are going to include tele-school for secondary school as well. We are going to use and implement school in order to address the inequality. We also implemented other guidelines for professional education, and which has to do with training, exams, and other assessments. There was a decision that was taken for basic education. All the exams that were programmed were cancelled. Only those that were for standard 11 and 12 that were mandatory, and they will allow access to higher education. Only those continued. With regard to Qualifica centers, we didn't separate these activities. All the activities related to enrollment, guidance, even the establishment of juries, we had to go online and use webinars whenever possible. I'm about to conclude. With regard to COVID-19, the pandemic worsened. We do have research that can prove that the pandemic aggravated social inequalities, and it was a major concern, and with consequences in our education system.
É tentar ao máximo que as escolas continuem abertas.
Conditions allow, we would like to reopen the schools. Otherwise, we'll have to close the schools again. I conclude thanking you all for your kind attentions, and I remain available for your questions.
Also a reaction to Teresa for this very comprehensive presentation.
Yeah.
Teresa, since time is already quite advanced, we will not stop now for questions on your presentation. But participants, of course, have the right question. So thank you very much. Now let us move to the next session. We will have in which we will have then our discussant, who is Joe Samuels. He has prepared an analysis, a brief presentation with a number of issues he identified from studying these presentations of today. plus he added a number of quite fundamental mega trends that have to be taken into account by, let's say, national qualifications frameworks and systems in any case. So I will try to share Joe's presentation. It is in, I think, do you see the presentation? Yes? Is the presentation visible? Policy learning?
Yes, we can see it.
Very good.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
yes, it is visible, yes.
Thank you very much. Joe, you will just tell me, please, when I need to change, okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Eduarda. I think we should say thank you to the 3 presenters, in fact, the 4 presenters, including yourself, Eduarda, for giving us so much and such a rich experience this afternoon that maybe we should give them a round of applause. Yeah, so what I want to firstly talk about is to say that the reason why I thought that I needed to speak about policy learning in pursuit of developing the ACQF is that we are not in the business of policy borrowing, but we want to listen to all the experiences across the world and try to see what are the best for the continent of Africa to take us forward. So that is why, you know, my title is policy learning and not policy borrowing. The second thing I want to touch on briefly is the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. How are we affected? And in fact, also to just take a few minutes to remember what this means for those people who have been infected and people who have passed away with this particular endemic. Then secondly, what can we learn from the current and the past? So the presentations made by Eduarda, by Brigitte, by Erika, and by Robin. And then, you know, one of the key questions then is also, what are the lessons and implications for the future of the ACQF? Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So if one then takes the presentations of today, I think that Eduarda gave us a very good overview of the ACQF project, where it is at the moment, as well as the role and the function, in fact, of the peer learning webinars, you know, that we have seen. And what are the key learnings from that? I think, you know, it gave us a very good grounding, as it were. Looking at the presentation that was made by France, I must say, I think the point also that Eduarda made is that very often, you know, in the English-speaking parts of the African continent, you know, we're not enriched by what is happening in Portuguese-speaking countries and in French-speaking countries. And so I think that the learning today has been just tremendous, as it were. So it was good to look at, to be explained, the new law, the professional qualifications, the fact that there are 2 national registers, one that allocates levels and the other one not, the long tradition of validation of non-formal learning. In fact, I think that the Mauritians learned a little bit from the French system because they are close to the Union, which is close to them. And I was in Mauritius, you know, when, you know, they were going through the system, and there was a person there, you know, from, from the island. Quite clearly, it is an 8-level framework. And I must say, I find it very, very interesting to have had a look and listen to the level descriptors, you know, that was clearly outlined, you know, in the presentation. So thank you so much for that. I think for me, the Portuguese presentation was indeed refreshing, because very often people don't speak about challenges up front. You know, they tell you about all the wonderful things that happen without saying these are the key challenges that we are confronted with. Again, one can see the system that has been outlined, and thank you very much for those links, because it will allow us to actually have a look, you know, after this particular session. I really enjoyed, you know, the issues raised around in the level descriptors, whether it should be competence and attitude, because I think that that is a very interesting idea that we will have to grapple with. So in fact, it was very good to see, you know, that, you know, those issues have been raised. I also think that the system in place with regard to the validation of qualifications are quite an important one. And it clearly seems to me that there's a system, you know, that is working across the country there. Mauritius, I think Robin, you know, was saying right up front that the Mauritian system that started in 2003, and it is 17 years young, was taking it very slowly and trying to build consensus. And I think that is such an important part of what has happened to qualification frameworks that has been around for a long time. The key question for me when I was looking at that is, do we still have the time? Do we have 17 years to build, you know, the African continental qualifications framework? And so we would have to think a little bit about how long it takes, you know, as we go. I think they've made very good progress. They've got all the elements in place for qualifications framework, registration, quality assurance, sectoral qualifications. And then I think the process around alignment, you know, that Robin explained is there. And I think the other thing that is quite interesting with regard to Mauritius, they are not only part, you know, of this process of the African continental qualifications framework, but they are part of the SADCOF qualifications framework, and of course, the transnational qualifications framework. And so I think we can learn quite a lot from them in terms of alignment, referencing, and so on, and those wonderful terms that we are using. Now, Robin doesn't reflect too much about COVID, and I want to again say thank you to the colleagues from Mozambique that spoke about the widened inequality that the pandemic has brought about. I do think that we must actually reflect very seriously on this pandemic and what it means for national qualifications framework. I want to congratulate, in fact, Mauritius, because they have dealt with the pandemic in a very good way. They only have 356 infections and 10 people passed away. And I think one person who passes away is one too many, as it were. But I think they have done remarkably well in Mauritius. Can we just move to the next slide, please? Now, what I did as preparation was I had a look at what this means for what the pandemic means in terms of numbers for the continent, and where it is that one can find, you know, the outbreaks of COVID and the pandemic throughout the continent. So 47 countries affected, more than 1 million people have been infected by the virus, and there's 23,000 deaths. Now, very often when one looks at statistics, you just look at the numbers. And people compare, you know, we're not doing too badly in terms of other countries and so on. But for each person who has passed away, it means it's a family member that passed away. In fact, it is a father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, children, and so on. And I do think what the pandemic has done is to bring out the best in people so that we can pledge solidarity with those who passed away and those who were affected. And we also know that there are people that are called long haulers, which are suffering from effects way beyond when they have come out of hospital, for example. The next slide, please. A number of people have reflected on what has the pandemic taught us. So we are all equal as humans. we are all connected, and our health is very precious and we neglected it. Some of the other things I think that is quite important is that we can choose to cooperate with each other, or we can simply try to go it alone. And we know that it doesn't work like that. By working together, we can find solutions to the problem. Now, pandemics have also brought out the worst and the best in people. I do think that we would have to rethink as humans the way that our relationship is with animals, because the predictions are that there will be more pandemics coming, and unless we make a change in that relationship, it is very important. The pandemic also taught us that who's important in life. And we have seen that it's not highly paid footballers that can save us, but it's the lowly paid essential workers and the healthcare workers that we turn to, in these kind of disastrous moments that we are in. So all of this has got, for me, an implication for when we think about national qualification frameworks and what do we want to see the future to be. Next slide, please. So if we look at national qualification frameworks and everyone who made a presentation today, so what are the implications of COVID-19, particularly when it comes to the economic downturn for NQFs and ACQFs? I know that in a number of countries, for example, South Africa is a key example where our economy has gone down with something like 51% in the second quarter. It means for this year that our economy would have gone down by 8% for the year. That has got huge implications for budgets. And so people might be faced with staff, cuts in staff, cuts in budgets, and also cuts in programs and so on. So we need to think a little bit about that. And what does it mean for us trying to build the NQFs and the AQF going ACQF? Then the second point, how can NQFs and ACQF address issues of inequality that I think was highlighted by Portugal, unemployment and poverty? Those are all key things within the African continent. Often I hear people speak about building back. Now, when you're building back, you are saying that somehow that was the ideal situation. But if part and parcel and embedded in your system is deep inequality, high unemployment and poverty, you cannot talk about building back. It's about making fundamental changes to our economic situation and in fact to our learning and recognition situation that we find. Thirdly, what are the implications of climate change for the future of NQFs and the ACQF? Now, some people argue that if we think that the pandemic is bad, that climate change will be worse. And therefore we need to make sure that when we think about this, that we need to include that kind of thinking about the future. Then the other point is, so what are the implications of the technological change for NQFs and ACQF? Here for me, we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And as I listen to the processes, the processes that people are following to recognize qualifications are tedious. And so we would have to be challenged as NQFs and thinking about the ACQF about how do we speed up these processes? How do we make sure that the turnaround times are improved and increased? And then of course, the World Economic Forum consistently talks about what are the skills for 2020, for 2030. Now, in terms of the vision, what we want for 2030, this is one of the visions for the African continent. So if we just look at that slide about the future skills and future jobs, we can see how the fundamental skills have actually moved, as it were. So we're in 2020, so there's a new category called cognitive flexibility, for example. How do we take that into account when we set up our level descriptors? When we look at 2030, judgment and decision-making, number one, fluency of ideas, you would see there that in fact, what is needed for 2030, if you look at the level descriptors, it is not reflected in there. And therefore, what this is challenging us in the NQF movement is to really look seriously about what the future is wanting from us, that we don't just focus on the future, on the present and what we did in the past, we also need to be forward-looking. The next slide, please. So here, for example, I know there are different systems of taxonomy in terms of how learning is categorized, but you would see that creativity is at the pinnacle. The argument that people are making now is that we actually need to have creativity, not from the school level already. We cannot just wait for it at NQF level 10 for creativity to be the key thing that we must be focusing on. The next slide, please. So here is another representation of that same taxonomy that actually places remembering, understanding, applying, and it then places creating, evaluating, and analyzing at the same level. So we actually need to think about our level descriptors in more creative ways than the way in which we thought about it before. Next slide. And when we speak about climate change, then we would see that very clearly that the projection that is made now is that the climate change would be worse than what COVID is. We feel COVID at the moment. We are sitting doing these webinars, and we are doing it remotely. Now imagine, power stations goes down, power lines go down, and in fact, we can't do anything. I mean, the massive winds and stuff coming in. So climate change is a very, very important thing that NQFs would have to think about as we go forward. Next slide, please. A lot of discussion that people have is about electricity and electrical cars, for example. But in actual fact, it's only 25% of the problem. There's other issues like agriculture. Some people argue that if we look at cattle, that it actually is the third largest country in the world. So agriculture is a key thing that produces these gases, manufacturing, transportation, and buildings. So in other words, if we only tackle electricity, we will only be tackling 25% of the problem. So this, we must think much broader than simply about electricity. Next slide, please. So in conclusion then, Eduarda and colleagues, we have learned quite a lot today about national qualification frameworks in France, Portugal, and Mozambique, and Mauritius. There are key lessons that we can learn that we can move forward from here. I'm also saying, in addition to those lessons, we also need to think about the future in ways that we haven't thought before. And this pandemic, as well as the future, if we are not relevant there, then in actual fact, we will not be able to deal with the challenges. And I do think that the African Continental Qualifications Framework, in the way in which it's been laid out and rolled out, can assist all of us as a continent, as well as countries, individual countries, to take us forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, for this marvelous speech to all of us, to our hearts, I think, first of all, because this is what really matters. Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions immediately to any of the speakers, including to Joe? Would you have any comments or question you would like to? If yes, please raise your hands. Come forward.
I raised a concern which was not answered.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Namubiru. So your question is about curriculum development. And it was a question asked in the beginning of this webinar.
Because I saw the concentration is on TVET and the universities. So I was wondering what is going to guide us at the best level.
I'd like to ask any of the presenters, perhaps Robin and also Joe, would you have a contribution to the question asked by Dr. Namubiru? And the question concerns curriculum development and also the inclusion, let's say, of school education and qualifications in this discussion on qualifications frameworks and ACQF. We have quite a number of contributions today that in a way give some elements of response to your question. So Dr. Gertrude Namubiru asked, the emphasis is much on TVET and universities, but how about basic education, especially now when many countries are reforming their curricula? What plans are in place to guide curriculum reforms? So the second part of the question, which plans are in place to guide curriculum reforms? This is a question to be addressed more to the individual countries. And if you want to speak from a continental perspective, I think you are very well placed since you are the leader of the curriculum cluster of CISA, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. But perhaps one of the countries that shared experiences today would like to say something about the first part, perhaps or what important reforms in their curricula, school curricula, are happening now, how this all relates also with the skills for the future that Joe just mentioned, or national qualifications frameworks development. If anyone, yes, okay, Doctor, from Morocco, Dr. Bakour, who is the director of the National Agency for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, would like to say, would like to give a contribution on this question. And of course, Monsieur Bakour, naturellement, vous avez compris que Madame Namubiru est surtout intéressée.
Mr. Bakour, you've understood that Madame Namubiru is indeed interested on this. So we look at those aspects. Thank you.
So, Mr. Bakour,
thank you, Eduarda.
French.
Thank you, Eduarda. I have two small questions to our colleagues, Madame Bouquet in France. The first is that after the reforms of January 2019, is it complying with the CEC? I have seen that there are 5 descriptors. Often you are engaged in your country with the European Union to comply with the CEC. That's the national framework. Will have to comply with the European framework. And so you mentioned the engineer degree with the system of accreditation. So what is the role played by the Commission on the engineer titles in this country? Thank you.
Mais je peux répondre?
Oui.
May I answer?
Oui, tu peux répondre. Oui.
Okay.
Yes, you can answer.
Our new framework has 8 levels, and we made through the decree which described the new qualification framework, let's say the way the qualifications of the old system in 5 levels would be integrated in the new one. But as you see, we have 8 levels now, but the first one is not really, I think we will not tell the Commission our level 1 is like the EQF level 1. This is still to be decided, but we have presented the new framework in June to the Commission, and we are supposed to present the referencing report in February. As we really worked for a national system, but also had an eye on the European descriptors, I hope things should go well. Was that did I answer the question?
Est-ce que la réponse vous a satisfait, Monsieur Bakour?
Are you satisfied with her answer, Mr. Bakour?
I think that Teresa Duarte wanted to say something, contribute, isn't it, Teresa? Would you like to reply to any question or give a contribution on the question regarding curriculum, perhaps?
Sim, sim, sim. Relativamente ao currículo...
English, perhaps would you
okay.
better for Dr. Namubiru, so
Okay.
she hears your reply directly, not
okay.
through
I will try. In Portugal, since 2019, we made a big reform related with general education. Now we have what we call the essential learnings from the first cycle to the third cycle of education. We made work related with learning outcomes in all the disciplines of the curriculum. And 1 month ago, we finished that work also to the upper secondary education. So it was a big challenge. It was also a cooperation between institutions from the Ministry of Education, mainly, with the associations of teachers. They made the curriculum, and then there was a public consultation, and now those curriculums are finishing, and they are ready to be implemented this. So I think it was a big work done by Portugal related with curriculum. All the big issues like climate change, entrepreneurship, and most of the issues that are very important now, we try to integrate them in the curriculum. That's all.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gertrude Namubiru, we really appreciate the fact that you are very consistent and you really try to link the issues and the developments related with curriculum in basic education, school education, with this discussion and work that is going to be done on the ACQF. So
yeah, but my concern is not answered well. Yeah, my concern is I expected the qualification frameworks to guide the curriculum development because they are at the exit level. We are looking at the exit profile of the learner, and also and we base on that to develop the curriculum, so that by the time the learner reaches the exit class, he or she has already acquired the competencies already set in the qualification framework. But your concentration is on the TVET and universities. What about the basic education level?
Sorry, Eduardo, can I respond to that question?
Please, Joe, you can, because
who is going to guide us so that we make the learners?
Please, Joe.
Yes. Okay. Let me say that, and I mean I can use the South African example. That the point that Gertrude makes is quite an important one. That you know you get different types of qualification frameworks, and you know if the qualification framework is a comprehensive framework, then you know schooling is part and parcel of the framework. So, for example, in South Africa, you know, there are there's a qualification, you know, that people are leaving the schooling with. It is called, in our case, the National Senior Certificate. The National Senior Certificate is a qualification that has been registered at NQF level 4 in a 10-level framework, and it outlines very clearly what are the outcomes that is expected of a learner, who passes, that NQF level 4 qualification. So from the perspective then of the curriculum is normally the responsibility of the Department of Education. They use that qualification, the outcome specified, and then what they then do is they develop the curriculum, so that the curriculum can teach towards those particular outcomes that has been specified. Now, I had spoken in general about the top skills for 2030 and the issue about creativity. Now, for example, in our level descriptors, creativity only comes in, at NQF level 10. And so what we would have to do going forward, thinking about this, is to then say, what are the implications for this, for curriculum development and so on? So that if one makes a change to the level descriptors, you would then have to build in creativity at different levels. And in fact, a number of people are arguing that what the schooling system is doing, the schooling system, in fact, it inhibits the creativity in children. So we would have to do other things. And so what they are putting forward is the idea of play, that children learn through play, and that in actual fact, we need to build in many more playful activities to be able to create and to encourage creativity within the children. So I'm saying that in itself is a big issue that is being taken up in various ways in the curriculum. So in South Africa, for example, they have set up a whole number of different groups throughout the country to see how can they encourage play at the early childhood development level, at grade 1, at grade 2, grade 3, and so on. So what I'm saying is there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done, but in essence, the conversation here is at the level of the outcome. And quite clearly, when we are thinking about this stuff at the ACQF level, we also need to think about, so how will the new thing look like, and what are the kinds of things that we need to put in place to assist with curriculum development and a whole range of other dimensions that has been mentioned here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Namubiru, we can continue the conversation in the next webinars, of course, and if you like, you can send us, you can also make a presentation about the work of the curriculum cluster. It would be perhaps very, very useful here also for our group. If you like, we can continue the conversation on by email. So colleagues, we are a bit now, let's say, very close to the closure of the webinar. But as always, we would like to please take 5 minutes of your time and patience. And for this, we would like to ask you to please prepare your smartphones. Let us do our very brief and easy assessment of main learnings from today's webinar, since this is a learning activity. Are you all ready with your smartphones? Let me just very briefly then share here the screen with this very, very simple explanatory presentation. So please, you can log in. You can go to your browser, internet browser, and log in this web internet address, www.menti.com. And then you will reach a place where you are asked for a code. And please enter this code, 4807-256. And there you have immediately the questions. There are 3 questions for our very brief assessment. So the question 1, I'm just presenting, and then my colleague Erika will put the actual instrument online. So, which are the main objectives of the Mauritius NQF? And you have just to write 3 words or 3 expressions in any language, English, French, or Portuguese. Then the question 2 is a multiple choice question and is about the level descriptors of the French National Qualifications Framework. Today, Brigitte gave us a very in-depth analysis and information about the level descriptors. And so the question is very simple. Which are the 3 domains of level descriptors of the French NQF? And you have a choice of among 7, you have to choose 3, not more than 3. So this is the second question. The third question, oui?
Please, je suis pas encore connecté. Si vous pouvez me donner le code.
I'm not yet still connected. Okay. If you can give us the password again for me to come back in. Thank you.
Okay, there is the code. 4807256.
J'arrive pas. C'est dommage.
Quand vous êtes dans Mentimeter.
I'm not able. Well, I'm sorry.
Erika, is the code correct?
Yes, the code is correct, but I will wait till you finish your presentation and then start the survey.
Okay. Then the third question is, which element of the 3 NQFs presented today are most important from the perspective of your institution? So what is it that is very important for your institution, for your country, let's say? And you have also choices, and you can choose up to 3 out of these 5 choices. One is the NQF is comprehensive, so all levels, types of qualifications, all from basic education to higher education. Then another option is that they have online registers of qualifications for visibility, transparency, and users use. Then the recognition of prior learning is linked with the NQF. It's a third option. The fourth option is governance on the basis of partnership, responsibility of all partners. And the fifth is the NQF is not static. It is able to evolve and to adapt to new demands, new trends and needs. So I stop sharing. And so now my colleague will start already the webinar, the Mentimeter exercise. So you can see there on the top the code 4807256. So many people are already replying. Dr. Robin, you will tell us if it's a good learning outcome. So the objectives of the NQF of Mauritius, as participants are writing.
Yes, indeed. It looks like the key ideas, key objectives have been well represented there. I can see was a couple of words in Portuguese.
Yes.
Comparability seems to be a big one, right?
Also, paridade is there, which is parity. End of the jungle, that's a nice one. So, qualifications. Comparability, transparency, governance, I see. Okay. So 15 persons are responding, are contributing, 17. You still have a few seconds if you want to add a couple of words on this question. So what do you remember from the objectives of the Mauritius NQF? End of the jungle is increasing. Okay. Okay. So 21 persons, colleagues have responded. Fine. Thank you. Some colleagues do not have connection sur Menti. It's a pity. I think it's the case of Morocco and also in a colleague from Senegal. Perhaps you want to try enter again, Monsieur Cissé. Now it's time, let us move then directly to the second question, which is a multiple choice question. So which are the descriptors of the French NQF? There are 3 domains of the descriptors of the French NQF. Can you choose them? Knowledge, skills, and responsibility and autonomy. Oh. Who has done this? Probably Brigitte. Okay. Oh, this was a good lesson. Everybody retained very well out of the many options, the 3 correct ones. Yeah, and we have also learned, for example, from the case of Portugal, that descriptor that appears there in yellow, responsibility, autonomy, that used to be in the EQF, first EQF, let's say, version called competence. In Portugal, the discussion went into the direction of considering this more under the angle of attitude. Oh, I see there is a variety appearing: teamwork, flexibility, adaptability. Probably these are wishes, aspirations. Also, that all these elements are also values that they should appear somehow in the level descriptors. Could be a good discussion for the ACQF. Okay, 21 persons, 22 have replied. Thank you very much. I see that everyone has a different, there are a number of different choices. If you all agree, then let us move to the last question. Yes, it is also a multiple choice question. I hope you can see very well on your mobile phones. So what are the most important elements that you take away from this session today, from these 3 experiences? What is it that is very important in your view for your country, for your institution? So the options are: the NQF is comprehensive, comprises and addresses all levels, types, subsectors of qualifications. Interesting. So many people are voting for that first, comprehensive. Oh, I see that the recognition of prior learning, or la VAE ou bien le RVCC, are also getting many votes. And the highest number of votes is that the NQFs are not static. They have to evolve and adapt to new demands, new trends, and new big challenges, as the ones we are all facing now globally, that were very well addressed by Joe in his discussion presentation, and also by the presentations of our 3 cases, 3 countries. So the 24 persons have replied. Please, Erika, would you like then just to show the final results to complete this brief assessment, interactive assessment? The final results, starting from the first question. So the objectives of the Mauritius NQF, we had 22 responses: comparability, transparency, mobility, end of the jungle, classification, governance, alignment are on the top of the choices here. The next one. So which are the level descriptors? This is a bit of a technical question, but quite fundamental, because this is the first webinar in which we really have looked in detail at the level descriptions, level descriptors issue. So both in the case of Portugal and France as well. So the discussions around the level descriptors and the final understanding and definitions. Thank you. And the next question then. So I think that all countries value the fact that NQFs are not static, they evolve, they adapt. This requires naturally a capacity to monitor them, also to evaluate them, to choose new solutions or new directions. Then we have the comprehensiveness, the large, wide scope of the NQFs as the second choice, and then also the RPL. And this is really interesting, very important. So the recognition of prior learning, of competences acquired in non-formal and informal contexts. This is fundamental for lifelong learning and also for inclusion. And I think this is where the NQFs can play an important role in this big problem that was exacerbated or pinpointed by COVID-19 about inequalities, big divides. So NQFs have elements, have tools that can help address this big problem of inequality, social, digital, etc. So we conclude then this webinar, and we will meet again on the 24th of September. Please pencil in already in your calendars, your agendas. You are all most welcome. You are also welcome to invite your colleagues from your departments to send the links also to other departments, higher education, basic education, curriculum development, also social partners interested in this discussion, in these kind of topics. Maybe I would like just to say also a final word about what was quite impressive and important in the discussion today, to be just 30 seconds. I heard a lot the word valoriser, value, valorize, if this can be said in English. So give visibility and value to competences that are acquired in various ways, skills acquired in various ways. So the diversity of learning modalities that is so fundamental nowadays, and NQFs are able to capture this. We heard a lot about the learning outcomes approach as being fundamental to make this happen. This wide scope and this ability to capture the diversity of ways of learning throughout life. The clear distinction between quality assurance of training and quality assurance of qualifications. Maybe this is an important point to bear in mind also for the ACQF conversation later on. The transparency, the use of level descriptors as a reference for development of qualifications and of curricula and assessment criteria, etc., that are necessary, of course, to achieve qualifications. The question of governance, so underlining the role of sectors, of the industry, of various stakeholders in all discussions. And we have seen this in various ways throughout the three most important presentations today. And maybe just to conclude, the question that was put forward upfront by Joe Samuels about policy learning from each other to create not only a common understanding about many things, even when there are different approaches, when there are diverse angles and perspectives and needs, but creating also this mutual understanding. And Joe, for example, mentioned learning from systems like in English-speaking countries and Portuguese-speaking countries. All these various groups of countries, let's say, have achievements, have ways of addressing perhaps also common challenges and common objectives. And this is very important to learn from various solutions and various perspectives. And finally, COVID. COVID has to stay, let's say, the effects and the recovery from COVID. The silver linings also from COVID, they are there, have to be part of the conversation further in NQF's development and consolidation, and also in the ACQF process further on. I'd like to say big thank you to all of you, all colleagues who stayed connected until now, and for I'd say also the good mood and good atmosphere that is part of these webinars. So we meet again, if you all want to join again, on the 24th of September. And we hope then, if it's confirmed from Morocco, we hope to have Morocco presenting its national qualifications framework. We hope to have our dear Tarek Al-Sindi, Dr. Tarek Al-Sindi, presenting Bahrain national qualifications framework, and also the Arab qualifications framework, a regional overarching framework. Mr. Tarek Al-Sindi has very interesting news and information coming out also of the way how Bahrain addressed the COVID-19 crisis through the national qualifications framework. It will be very welcome. And we hope also to have CAMES, which is the Conseil Africain pour l'enseignement supérieur en Afrique, sharing with us also the good practice they have in quality assurance of higher education qualifications in the Francophone.
Les toilettes, il faut afficher de l'eau. Tu sais pas l'eau coule. Vous êtes étudiant. Les deux.
Sorry? I see that many colleagues are
Mais regardez, si l'eau là-bas, vous pouvez.
Okay, colleague, you can mute the microphone. We know it's the webinar.
Il y a le son dedans.
Please, you have all the presentations on the webpage. The video of the webinar will be made available very soon in the coming days. So the link you can have, you can see it in French, Portuguese, and in English in the YouTube channel. And we stay in touch for the next workshop. Any questions you might have, in addition to those that are in the chat box now, and wishes also that you have, so lots of formulations of need to further cooperate, need to further exchange on national qualifications and qualifications. This all has to be continued. This is why we are trying to organize these discussions in a structured manner. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Try to keep your mood high despite the big problems we are all facing, all the world, all countries, each one of us. And see you on the 24th of September again. It is really a pleasure to be with all of you. Muito obrigada, caros colegas de todos os países.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, all the countries. Thank you so much for making time to attend. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
أهلا مرحبا.
Please let us
Hi. تحياتي.
show
الحمد
you.
لله.
Deus. Everybody, you can open your
Shall we take a group picture for the website?
Yes, yes, you can. I'm doing a screenshot, and I can take also a picture. And you can naturally, you can also inform your colleagues and put information on your websites. CAMES already did it recently, so let us do it. Dieudonné, I want to see your face, please. Maxwell, also Colleen, Pedro, everybody, Maria Madalena, please. And Doutora Down, por favor. Everybody.
Hi, Dora.
Hi, Maxwell. I hope you are doing better.
Yes, I'm good.
يا هانسن ازيك؟
الحمد لله. كيفك دكتور؟
الله يخليك.
شوفك الأحد إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله لحد إن شاء الله دكتورة.
إن شاء الله إن شاء الله.
And a big thank you to our interpreters.
Bye, over.
Interpreters, John, Elio, Ellie, and the last colleague is the Francophone colleague who wants to say his name. And a big thank you, please, to my colleagues from European Training Foundation, who are Sylvia and Erika. They are behind the steering wheel, let's say, of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Pauline on the screen. Yes, Pauline, you have to use us. And Dieudonné, you don't want to show yourself? Thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
can say bye and see you next time.
Right.
In 14 days exactly, 24th of September. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Stay safe. Thank you so much.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Bye.
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 Bye.